All right, good evening, everyone. Wanted to welcome you to tonight's discussion. Thank you so much for being here. And we'll have folks trickle in. Thanks to James, who's going to help us with technical aspects that always come up with Zoom. So good evening. Welcome to the 4th annual Andrea Jenkins Lecture Series. I want to welcome you to this historic series and discussion. My name is Dr. Sabby Labor. I'm the director of the Gender and Sexuality Center for Queer and Trans Life here at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. This annual lecture honors Andrea Jenkins and works to center the voices of queer and trans people of color. She is known for being the first openly transgender African-American woman elected to public office in the US, serving since January 2018 in the Minneapolis City Council. This event is hosted by the GSC, which is the university's LGBTQ Resource Center. First, I would like to acknowledge the land we're on. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built on the traditional, within and on the traditional homelands of the Dakota people that was ceded in the treaties of 1837 and 1851. The promised payment of almost $3 million has never been paid to the original stewards of the land that we now occupy. We celebrate and honor the Dakota people living and leading on this land still. We also acknowledge that words just aren't enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for our Native, Indigenous, and American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community members. A few housekeeping notes for tonight's session. So first, there are live captions available. They are automated through Zoom, so they're not 100% accurate. And they don't know all the amazing queer and trans words that we might bring to them yet. So thanks for your patience with mostly accurate captioning. If you'd like to turn the captioning on, you can click the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen to view those captions. And if you have any trouble doing that, just send a message via the chat to James Schwartz, and he can help you troubleshoot how to get those captions viewable on your screen. You can also change your name and add your pronouns to appear with your Zoom name for this session if you'd like. And to do that, you would click Participants, you locate your name, then you click the Rename button, and then you can edit to how you would like your name and pronouns, if you use them, to appear, and then you click Save. So some of us do this every day, some of us don't have to use Zoom every day, so I just wanted to cover those too. So next, I have a lot of gratitude to share. So first, I want to thank Andrea for continuing to entrust me and my GSC colleagues to bring her vision to life for the series. I want to thank our staff team in the GSC, Key, Lewis, Maida, Eloise, and James. These humans made it possible to carve out the space tonight and have really held it down this year. And last but not least, we want to thank our campus sponsors who supported this event. So first, we have our Transgender Advisory and Action Team, the National Center for Gender Spectrum Health, and the Minnesota Women's Center based here at the U of M as well. If you want to connect on Instagram with any of our speakers tonight or with the GSC, here's some of the social media handles that you might follow and engage with. All right, so let's get right to it. The reason we're here tonight to center the voices of trans people of color and celebrate their resiliency, leadership, and activism of women like Andrea Jenkins. Andrea's helped shape our city, our state, and our nation regarding understanding and rights for trans people, women, people of color, and trans women of color. And I'm honored to introduce Andrea Jenkins, Vice President of the Minneapolis City Council, whom the series is named after. I'll read her bio, although many of you know that these words don't really come close to representing her true involvement or even scratch the surface of her impact. So I think many of us know that. So Andrea Jenkins is a writer, performance artist, poet, and transgender activist. She's the first African-American openly trans woman to be elected to office in the United States. Jenkins moved to Minnesota to attend the University of Minnesota in 1979 and was hired by the Hennepin County government, where she worked for a decade. Jenkins worked as a staff member of the Minneapolis City Council for 12 years before beginning work as a curator of the Transgender Oral History Project at the University of Minnesota's Jean Nicholas Tretter Collection in Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Studies. She holds a master's degree in community development from Southern New Hampshire University, a MFA in creative writing from Hamline University, and a bachelor's degree in human service from Metropolitan State University. She's a nationally and internationally recognized writer and artist, a 2011 Bush Fellow to advance the work of transgender inclusion, and recipient of numerous awards and fellowships. In 2018, she completed the Senior Executives in State and Local Government at Harvard University. Join me by welcoming Andrea Jenkins.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning, wherever you are in the United States. I want to just thank Sabby and all the team at the GSC for hosting this event, and the University of Minnesota. I'm so honored to have a dialogue in my name, that I get to invite thought leaders in the trans and gender nonconforming, gender expansive, gender fluid, gender fabulous community to come to campus and share their ideas, their thoughts, their advocacy and activism with the University of Minnesota. I want to thank you again, Sabby, for the land acknowledgement, but I also want to just offer that not only are we standing on stolen land, but we are in a country built on stolen labor. And so I think we always need to have that as context for any conversations or dialogues that that we have. To have a lecture series named after you, it's still, and this is the fourth one. I still don't think it has fully sank in how big of an honor it is for me, because I'm running and I'm doing and I'm talking and advocating and just living life, and you don't really get to sit back and think about this thing. But I want to just really take a minute to acknowledge and lift up one of our earlier speakers. And we had some amazing speakers in this program thus far. I'm going to go out on a limb and say none more amazing as the two legendary guests we have tonight. But I don't know, man. Some people might argue, because I want us all to take a moment of silence for Monica Roberts, the trans griot, who shared her wisdom and history, knowledge of history, knowledge of trans history, knowledge of Black history with us in 2019. And we lost Monica last summer to a tragic event. And so I just want to ask everybody to take a moment of silence and just reflect on Monica's life and the contributions that she made to trans history, to lifting up all of our lives, and to Black history as well. Thank you. Thank you. We love you, Monica. We miss you. And we will be forever in your debt as a trans griot. And I'm so thrilled that that work, that blog is still continuing. But I mentioned that we've had some amazing guests. Monica was together with Dr. C. Riley Snorton, a trans historian. And then we had Lady Dane, Aditi Figueroa, and J. Mace III. They came and blessed our stage. And I wish you guys could be here so we could fellowship and eat dinner and just do all the things, but we're virtual. So, but this year we have two amazing, like I said, legendary leaders, both in their own right. And I will get to their amazing bios and introductions in a little bit. But first, I just want to really take a moment to acknowledge, what is going on in the world here in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, on the South Side, in Ward 8, the ward that I represent, the ward that George Floyd was murdered in. And we can say murdered now because guess what? He is a convicted murderer. Second-degree murder, guilty. Manslaughter, guilty. Third-degree murder, guilty. And so George Floyd was murdered like literally 2 blocks from my house. And it is the district that I represent. So each and every one of those people that you saw on TV crying, sobbing in the video, begging for George's life, those are my constituents. Those are the people that I represent. And so we have had a really challenging time. I think people are rightfully joyous, but also I think people are still resolved to continue to struggle for freedom and justice and equality. And I am joining them in that struggle. The verdict to me is about humanity, about Black humanity. It's about justice. It's about equity and equality. But more importantly, it's about accountability. And how do we hold these bad actors accountable? And we know that it's more than just bad actors, that it's a system that is at play that keeps us, that tries to keep us oppressed. Before we got on this call, Major and I were just talking about 50 years ago, 52 years ago now, to be exact, the battle was about police brutality. The Stonewall riots were a response to police brutality. I teach poetry, and this year I taught a poetry book called 1919. I didn't know this, but in 1919, there were riots just like the ones that we have been witnessing in 2020. There were race riots all over America about police brutality. That's over 100 years ago. That's how long we've been dealing with this issue, and way longer than that. But there is some hope in this verdict. Some hope that that justice and accountability was served. It gives us a little hope, the same hope that carried us through the dark ages of slavery, the same hope that Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera had for trans liberation, the same hope that carried so many of us to be able to witness a Black president, and now a Black woman, the first woman ever, is a Black woman to be the vice president of the United States. So this hope gives us a little more chance to fight, a little more strength to continue to build coalitions, because we know that only through coalitions can we change our society. And coalition building is gonna be what is needed to end racism, because we can't do it as Black and brown people. We gotta, white people have got to change white supremacy. But we gotta work with them and push them and get them to make that change. So, and you know, I know all of you who are on the screen and people in the room have been on the front lines making change, and I'm so grateful for you, and so appreciative. And I know we want to get to hear from our guests. So you know, keep struggling, keep fighting. We will get through this. I want to share a little poem that I wrote. I wrote it back in June of 2020, June 7th to be exact. It was Prince's birthday. And it was the day that myself and 8 of my colleagues stood in Powderhorn Park and pledged to defund the Minneapolis Police Department. And we have been doing exactly that. We have shifted $8 million from the police department to create a mental health response and to create the Office of Violence Prevention, which will work to interrupt and intervene in communities so before violence happens, so that we can try to nip this at the root. And we will continue to reallocate resources from the police department to other parts of our communities, to programs that help to keep people safe. But I wrote this piece for that occasion, and it's called Quarantine Soul. I only think of you on 2 occasions, baby, and that's day and night. Babyface. One Sunday morning, I listened to the entire discography of Luther Vandross. It made me smile. I cleaned my entire house, one room at a time. I found a jar of Miracle Whip, dated used by 6/20/2008. Little Richard, the founding father of rock and roll, passed on. Oh, Lucille, why can't you be true? Our babies falling asleep at the breakfast table that doubles as their desk. Homeschool moms rule. Mother's Day came and went, socially distant days and nights, singularity, solo dinner for one. Epic moments moves, things, epic moments make movements. Epic movements start with moments. 61 seconds was a moment. Jamar Clark was a movement. Oh Lord, we miss Prince right now. He'd probably say something like, dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Prince went to Baltimore, wrote a song when Freddie Gray was killed, was murdered, throat crushed, back broke. Yeah, Freddie got the knee choke too. There's a deeper, darker side, nefarious forces operating just under the surface. It's like watching The Last Dance, make you want to stand in line for 48 whole hours to get them new Airs or Yeezys or that Popeye's fried chicken sandwich. Yeah, that's my addiction. Love it when mama frying up them wings in the kitchen. Yeah, but now we can't breathe because Ahmaud Arbery was murdered in the streets and Breonna Taylor was murdered in her sheets. It's like being treated without respect. It's having to fight for everything. It's not getting the same chances. It's being left out like you don't matter. It's death. I grew up listening to Public Enemy in real time. I dialed 911 a long time ago. Don't you see how late they reacting? They only come and they come when they wanna, then bring the morgue truck and involve the coroner. Quarantine blues. Sitting at home thinking of a master plan. Elizabeth Alexander asked, what if the mightiest word was love? We sing songs, dances, paint pictures, documenting our pain for the world to witness. But nothing changes. Nothing ever changes. Minneapolis, goddamn, we can't breathe. The EPA eased restrictions on polluting our communities, coronavirus attacking our lungs. America's got his knee on our necks. Mama, it hurts. My back hurts. My stomach hurts. Everything hurts. They're gonna kill me. White supremacy is a public health crisis, and we got the cure. So what do you want to talk about next, beauties? Revolution? You wouldn't use that word if you knew what it meant. It ain't pretty. It's bloody. It overturns things. Somewhere in America tonight, somebody is saying, make America great again. We say emphatically no. Somewhere in America tonight, somebody is saying, why don't they just go home? We say defiantly no. Somewhere in America tonight, somebody is asking, what do they want? We say demandingly, we want change. Change the way we educate, change the way we employ our communities, change the way we live and treat each other, change the way we keep our communities safe. There's a new breeze blowing in. Young voices taking over. When you put your knee on George Floyd's neck, you woke up a sleeping giant. young voices said, no. They said, when we know justice, you will know peace. No justice, no peace. Hashtag Ayana Dior, stop killing Black trans women. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, without any further ado, I want to introduce our two guests tonight. I'm so honored, and you know, as I was reading that poem, you know, Major, you and I, we have been out here for a long time, but we got the young voices, and they taking over, and so I'm so glad that you and Raquel are able to be here tonight. Miss Major Griffen-Gracy. Miss Major is a Black transgender activist who has fought for over 50 years to create a better world for her transgender non-conforming community. Major is a veteran of the infamous Stonewall riots, a former sex worker, and a survivor of the Dannemora prison and the Bellevue Hospital's Queen Tank. Her global legacy of activism is rooted in her own experiences, and she continues to work to uplift transgender women of color, particularly those who have survived incarceration and police brutality. Ms. Major's fierce commitment and intersectional approach to justice has brought her to the forefront of many causes, including caring for people living with HIV and AIDS, working with trans prisoners, and currently mentoring her girls from Little Rock, Arkansas, where she runs the House of Gigi, a retreat center for Black, trans, and gender nonconforming leaders from the Southern United States. Her recent creative projects include executive producing the film Trans in Trumpland, which is streaming on platforms now, and a book on her life's activism, a collaboration with her longtime assistant, Toshio Moronic, which will arrive late in 2021 on Verso Books. I first met Miss Major in 2012 in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we were both receiving an award from TFAN, Trans Faith in Action. And man, it was a beautiful moment. Valerie Spencer, Monica Roberts, yeah, just so amazing. Our next guest is Raquel Willis. Raquel Willis is a Black transgender activist, writer, and media strategist dedicated to elevating the dignity of marginalized people, particularly Black transgender people. Throughout her career, Raquel has held impactful positions like the Director of Communications for the Ms. Foundation, Executive Director of Out Magazine, and a national organizer for the Transgender Law Center, TLC. In 2018, she founded Black Trans Circles, a project of TLC focused on developing the leadership of Black trans women in the South and Midwest by creating healing justice spaces to work through oppression-based trauma and incubating community organizing efforts to address anti-trans murder and violence. During her time at Out, she published the Trans Obituaries Project to highlight the epidemic of violence against trans women of color and developed a community source 13-point framework to end the epidemic. This project won a GLAAD Media Award. Raquel is a thoughtful Raquel is a thought leader on gender, race, and intersectionality. She's experienced in online publications, organizing marginalized communities for social change, nonprofit media strategy, and public speaking, while using digital activism as a major tool of resistance and liberation. Raquel is currently working on her debut memoir detailing her coming of identity and activism. And you can follow Raquel on Twitter at Raquel Willis _ and Instagram at Raquel Willis _Willis. And without further ado, and I guess I should say I first met Raquel in 2017, maybe it was 2016 even, in a leadership development program through Auburn Seminary. And we got to spend a whole year together getting to know each other. And Raquel's interview is a part of the Transgender Oral History Project, which also lives at the University of Minnesota. So you can go online and check it out if you want to learn more about Raquel's history and background. And without further ado, I am going to turn the microphone over to Raquel and sit back and listen to this amazing discussion. Thank you both for being here. I love you both so much, and I'm just so honored that you're here.
Take care, honey.
Thank you. Love you too. Woo! Wow, what an opening, huh, Mama Major?
Yeah.
You know, it's such an honor always to be in space with you, to be in conversation with you. And of course, I have to give it up to you, Miss Andrea, just because your work is so powerful, and you model what it means to show up fully as yourself in whatever space that you're in, because you've transcended so many different avenues, from writing and poetry and being a historian, and laying kind of that foundation, I think, for us to kind of look back at what our story is, right? And you've created new ways in politics for Black trans people and so much more. So thank you so much for modeling what it means to be a Black trans multi-hyphenate individual as well. And thank you, of course, for your words and modeling leadership, and literally being at the center of this new era of the fight for Black lives and Black dignity. So just want to underscore that. And of course, thank you for your poetry. All right, so Mama Major, you know, I talk to you, I feel like we end up talking, whether it's personally or publicly, every few months. And it's always a joy, and there's always so much new insight that you bring. But I know in our last few conversations, what feels the most resonant to start with is really just talking about this new chapter in your life that you're in right now, as a parent again. And I mean, you have consistently had waves of being a parent. You're always, obviously you already have had children, and then of course you have your children in community, which I consider myself to be one of. But right now you're holding Isaiah. So can you talk a little bit about Isaiah and what it's like to be a parent again?
Well, you know, it is quite a pleasure being this all over again. So I am taking it slow this time, taking it easy, and making sure I don't miss a thing, not one thing. And he's a good boy. Nice and good. Yeah.
Yes, I feel like Isaiah has been a co-panelist in a couple of our conversations already.
Yes.
And just
Yes.
always so gentle and just there, just soaking it all in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tonight we're talking about what it means to raise your voice for liberation. And your work has been so crucial in laying some of that foundation I was talking about that lives alongside the work that Miss Andrea, the namesake of our conversation tonight, has done. And I just think about the ways that you have continuously been present in all of these different moments that you've lived through to raise your voice for liberation, whether during the Stonewall era, right? Raising your voice around police brutality and the ways in which Black people, brown people, low-income poor people, sex workers, people who've been incarcerated, people who've been profiled, and of course, queer and trans people, how we deserve to own our dignity and own our power at all times and not be kicked around by the state. But, I'm always interested in if there's a moment. Do you remember like the first moment you felt a need to raise your voice?
Yeah, it was back in New York, and it was 62, 63, and a friend of mine named Puppy was killed. And the police didn't give a damn whether she lived or died. And they broke in her apartment, and she had 2 dogs in there who were Rottweilers. And it came to me that the police didn't care about that, They didn't pay attention to who the dogs were or anything. And I felt as if they didn't know about it, they didn't ask about her. And since then, I've been advocating for Black transgender women, and it's just wrong the way they treated people, us included, over the years. And thank God, finally, it's convicted one. I don't know where it comes from, but that's one. So maybe it's going to change to the opposite, I hope so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for bringing Puppy's name and life into this space. And, even as we talk about just the unfortunate list of people that especially in our community, right, that we have lost along the way. I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, these murders and instances of violence stack up, right? And I think a lot of us come into this social justice work, this liberation work, because we've witnessed the lives of people that we love, we care about, or at least people that we see ourselves in being taken away. And so thank you for naming that, because I feel like that's a more universal experience than maybe we even realize.
Yeah, well, you don't think about it. No one thinks about it. And it's a fact, The lives lost is unbelievable. It's the police violence, just unbelievable.
Right.
And maybe this time, we got some justice.
Absolutely. Yeah. I also just, for me, it's interesting too, because I think the difference, well, one of the differences I think between that kind of initial era that you started to raise your voice in, and this era now is that, our stories are more visible than ever before. People talk a lot now about this visibility moment, what it means to be visible as a trans person. And I know you've obviously witnessed this Hollywood moment for trans people. You've witnessed the changes in media, and people have recognized, right, the stories that you have to tell in media. And then I think the other piece that I'm holding as well, right, especially as you may nod to the Derek Chauvin case and what happened to George Floyd, and the importance of, as tragic as it is, the story of George Floyd getting out into the world. Can you talk a little bit more about the role that you have witnessed in terms of how our stories have been told and shared in media in the past versus now?
Well, in the past, there was no story of us. It was gays and lesbians, and of course, they died immediately when it started to show, oh, they killed them. But it has changed to whereby they at least let us live to have the movie. I do not find really that they have engraced us to whereby we live a full life. We don't live fully. We don't live an uncomplicated life. We don't live as we do. Look at what Andrea Jenkins has done and become. Where's the story about that? Where's the lifetime of people who have succeeded? Me, for example, I have this house here in the South. Where's the talk about that? That kind of thing has not happened as yet, but it's who's to say it's around the corner.
Right. Yeah. For me, it's been an interesting journey because I came into my, I can't say that I necessarily came into my identity in the visibility moment. I think I was kind of like that last class of trans people right before, we kind of saw Laverne on Orange is the New Black and Janet Mock and her memoirs, and then of course now her TV production career. But I did, I think, kind of deepen my activism and come into organizing with the backdrop of that visibility. And I had studied journalism. I remember being in journalism school, and I thought, I was gonna have to be stealth or in the closet about my identity to do the work that I wanted to do, because I knew the storytelling was important and there was a power there, but I hadn't quite connected the dots on how important it was for me to be authentic as a Black trans woman, right?
Yeah.
And so I found that along the way, in different ways, right? And I think you witnessed some of that too. But I think what's powerful about you is that you have kind of, in your own way, latched onto the power of media. Obviously, you've been had your story told in different ways and worked with people, whether it was on the Major documentary, right, a few years ago, or working with Tourmaline on The Personal Things, the animated short that you were a part of, and different types of production. So what has that experience been to kind of be in this moment now where people are like, hey, you have a story to tell, we want to hear it, let's support you now?
That's real cute that they're doing this now. but it doesn't mean nothing to me because it doesn't affect the work. You know, there are Black girls who still do not get acknowledged, you know, who don't get what I get. And I don't think it's fair, you know. It should be all of us, you know, that are get to tell our stories, get to show what things we can do, you know. Janet and Laverne are prime examples of what we can do, you know, and that's important that we get that done. I hope that the movie Major gives girls hope that they can go out and get it done, you know, and not be hurt or embarrassed by what the world has to say, because the world doesn't know what they're fucking talking about.
Yeah.
You know, at least I don't think so. So,
yeah. No, I think that is so true. I mean, on any given day, somebody is talking slick about trans people in the newspaper, or whether it's, you know, a politician, well, a lawmaker, or somebody just saying, you know, who isn't us, right? We're lucky we now have like an Andrea Jenkins or Philippe Cunningham and so many more. And of course, their power is in some ways constantly up against so many other people who are so ignorant about our experiences. So can you talk a little bit more about, you know, I know we have a lot of folks on the call now who in this discussion who are interested in how they can have their voices heard. What would you say are some of the ways that people just getting into social justice can kind of, I guess, learn the ropes or kind of figure out their passion in this space?
You know, what they would have to do is they would have to work with an older girl, because there's no accounting for experience and what we've gone through. And the girls who have survived this, they should have younger people there to take their wisdom and go on with it, you know. Like you and I, you know, I am so empowered by the fact that you have accomplished all the things you have done, you know. And it's important that you take the time to get to know me, learn from my stories, what I have seen and witnessed, you know. So if they need to get together, young people, and work with other people, you know, because when we die, it goes, you know.
Yeah, legacy. Yeah, and as you talk about that, I think about Monica Roberts again, right?
Yes.
And you know, I think the things, like, I've learned so many different things from so many OGs, right? So much from you and your work around the organizing and the importance of being rooted in something real and being rooted in community. When I think about Monica Roberts, you know, that was a part of her lessons as well. But of course, I think what I most take away from Monica is the audacity for us to tell our own stories on our own terms through her work. And similarly, I think with Andrea Jenkins as well. But as you're saying that, was there someone that you leaned on like earlier on in your work that you felt like you were able to kind of glean some of that understanding from?
No.
Right. Because I'm like, you know, I think we have this idea that like you sprang from the heavens and came down during the Stonewall era, right? But it, but yeah, what was that like for you?
No child. Andrea can tell you it is not easy out there. And, people don't understand that nowadays, there's a collaboration between young and old. Back then, it was, if you're old, you weren't counted. They didn't ask you anything. They didn't think you had anything to tell the youth, Back when I got started, everybody was fending for themselves. So, and that becomes a hard thing to work with and to get inside and disassemble that, and work with the younger people. But it does work with some, for some not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, because when I think about what I've learned from you about that time period, I mean, y'all really were and are the first generation to kind of think of kind of a national LGBTQ community, a national, trans community, global even, right? Like everything was so local, as far as I know from history and what I've, learned and read and saw and listened to, until Stonewall happened. And then that was like a signal to a lot of people that, oh, there's something bigger that we're a part of.
Yeah. And what's funny is, out in San Francisco was the first riot that they had over police brutality, but they didn't pay any attention to that, And I guess because New York is New York, and it's the center of the world, when they went on happened there, they paid attention to it, but they didn't. The media weren't involved. There's no pictures of that. There's no stuff saying that this is what happened. It wasn't until word of mouth that went around. And that's just kind of sad. It got taken away from us by the fact and the legends and stuff. But that's the way it goes, They don't consider us a part of that community, And that's the same, but we are. And like I said, the T should come first.
Right. You're the first person, and I think folks who work at TGI Justice Project are the first folks that I ever witnessed putting the T first. TGL, or TLGB. So interesting.
Yeah. Well, shit, we did that right. Wasn't a bunch of gays, wasn't a bunch of lesbians. We started that right. And so the T should have come first, like I said. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think of exactly what you said, like the Compton cafeteria riots and the splash that it should have made, right? And and it continues, right? It's like
on to the day.
On to today, that the fight continues.
Yes.
But it, so for instance, like last year, in the aftermath of everything that happened with the murder of George Floyd, and Andrea TLBG, the aftermath of George Floyd and the murder of George Floyd. And, there were so many people who were saying, this has got to change. And like they were new in some ways to these conversations, right? Around racial justice, police brutality, abolition, defunding the police, you know, and then of course, I think part of that too, the timing of what happened to George Floyd hitting right before Pride Month. And then of course, we always knew that trans people, particularly Black and brown trans people, have been at the forefront of those conversations for decades, as Andrea nodded to. People started to make sense of it, right? But just because it was new to some people does not mean that this was a new discussion.
No, and what happened was all of a sudden white people were involved. There were lots of all the riots in the street all over the world. All of a sudden there were white people in the riots. So that brought attention to it, you know, that made it so much more important than it would have been if it had just been George that had died. But because of that, and because his kids were there, you know, that upset many people, you know, and then that changed the whole perspective of the entire thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I also think about like you were saying a second ago about the importance of the grassroots work, and how much of that work is so unseen. And you know, I as I think about now, and in some ways we're kind of experiencing a little bit of that again, I think, with the anti-trans legislation conversation, right? Like all of these laws and bills they're trying to pass to restrict the rights of trans people. Now I think for a lot of cis people, they're like, well, why? How did this come out of nowhere? You know, there was a New York Times headline that was, I think it was last week, that was saying, or maybe it was just a few days ago, that was saying, seemingly it comes out of nowhere that these conservative lawmakers are coming after the trans community. And we're like, say what? How is that new?
Yeah, no, it isn't. Because they've been coming after us since we've been in existence. They have been trying to cut off our throats to make sure we do not get a chance to be who we are. And it's the fact that we are so resilient and so smart, we get around that, you know. And now suddenly we have people who can fight for us.
Yeah.
Because we're not in a position to whereby we have the skills to attack these people. Yeah.
Right. But, you know, I think, you know, like our numbers are growing, our access is growing, right? Yeah. Like this is different than the fight, for instance, like you were saying at Stonewall, where and in many ways the fight was exactly the same, like the anti-cross-dressing laws.
Yeah.
Right.
The same thing.
Same thing, you know, but now as opposed to then, there are more trans people, I think, with some access, some platforms. You even talked about your visibility, who can say, actually, hold up, this isn't going down the same way it went last time.
Yeah.
We're doing something different with the bit of power we've accrued.
Yeah. And hopefully they won't get to change it. We'll fight for it. Because one thing we must do, we've got to learn to fight all the time.
Right. What do you think these folks trying to restrict the rights of trans people are so afraid of?
You know, they're afraid that if they don't fight this, it's going to all of a sudden appear in their families, you know. Oh, my son was born and now I got to call him she. well, so what? You know, it's no big deal. But they are like this thing that they're after kids, that is a just getting the road ready, because the moment they get that, they're going to come after the adults. And I know, as living as I have, that that is important for them to live their life and to be accepted for who they are. If they're not accepted, then why are they going after them? You know, and you know, must learn that without that, the kids do not stand a chance on living. What do they have to do? Die? You know, uh, is that going to make it better for us if they do die? You know, no. You know, this little boy that I hold in my arms today, they can't tell him how to live his life.
Mhm.
You know, that's important.
What does it feel like for you in this moment? And I know I've asked you this before, but in previous conversations, but you live in Arkansas, in Little Rock, Arkansas. Obviously, Arkansas became the first state to really kind of pass one of these far-reaching bans on transition care, particularly for minors. And of course, there's been a lot of like back and forth. The governor is kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth, saying, we're not going to do this. It's too broad. And then, of course, the legislature, is saying a different thing. But that is happening for you as a trans icon in the state that you live in, and you're the capital. You've been fighting and protesting about this now, and you also have a newborn child. So, what does that feel like for you?
What it feels like in 1969 all over again, you know, and it's a matter of I've got to fight it, because they are affecting the life of my son, you know, other people's child, you know. They are not taking into consideration the effect that it can have on these young people growing up in they are, you know, they don't see it. They don't realize it. And the people who are doing this don't have kids that are involved, you know. So yes, I'm fighting it, and it's going now to the ALCU, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Every time I see an image of you holding a sign, right? And it kind of adds to like that like photo album I have of you in my head, right? All the black and white pictures from back in the day, all the way up until, there's a photo from a few weeks ago of you at the Capitol. It's such a beautiful thing. Do you have any advice for young people on how to stay in this fight as long as you have? Like, what can they do to sustain themselves?
Don't give up, honey, and don't stop fighting. You've got to take time for yourself, when you've had too much, and get together. It's kind of like a car. Rejuvenate your battery as immediately, and then get back out there, because you can live the life you choose to live, and you have to fight the government to do that. Let's fight it.
Right.
Yeah.
Aww. I saw Isaiah looking at the camera, honey, a ham. So chill. He's so chill. Thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing
sure.
that. Yeah, because it is so draining, you know.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, like we
It's
know that
exhausting.
there's all this work to do, and it feels like when we get close to putting out one fire, then there's a whole nother, the Trump era.
I know, but that's what it takes, and right now we have to get used to it. It mustn't become a chore or a hard to do. You've got to relax, calm down, and put it out. That's simple,
Right.
Because it can't imagine, no, can't stop you.
Well, so for me, a lot of the work that I've been doing, more, I guess I've always kind of done in a way, but it's finally kind of become my main work, has been around supporting different parts of our community and having their stories told or shared. And I'm curious from you, what are some of the stories that you're eager to see that have not been kind of shared in media around our community?
They can take any of them, because the girls who work the streets, the girls who are just come out of prison, those girls are full of stories that has happened to them that has just been wrong. There are so many of us that are out there, waiting to tell their stories, or they share it amongst themselves, in the community. And they need to realize that if they would just let go and open up, and let these girls tell their stories, it would be a so much better world.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even keep track, I think, of all the stories that have transformed me. So when I first started organizing in Atlanta after college, I was working, I Miss Dee Dee Chambly and Miss Cheryl Courtney Evans from back in the day, who passed away.
Of course.
Yeah, and you actually might know Miss Tracy McDaniel too. But those were like our like local Miss Majors, right? Like you're this like national OG, and then we all have like our local OGs too. And so the things that they would share about their experiences, particularly Miss Dee Dee, I interviewed her in a series, and she was talking about her experiences being incarcerated in the 70s. And I saw all the like connections there from like the things you told me about your story, and so that felt so interesting, right? But I only had the access to those stories because I knew y'all personally, right? It wasn't because there were movies out there or books out there or TV shows that at that time were really enlightening me on those things. And I changed because yes, I'm a Black trans woman, but I mean, I came from I don't know if I should say immense, right? But I came from a bit of privilege, being able to go to college and all of that. But the beautiful thing I did not have was like the community of Black trans women that I didn't really find until after I left school and I was in the real world.
Yeah. See, so they need every story out there, because everybody's different, and things that we go through, they have a base in violence, but they're different. They're all different. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm eager to see more of those stories, because even when they talk about activism in our community, we don't get enough of the nuance, right? I mean, there are Black trans organizers working on, you know, incarceration and abolition, and have been doing that long before this current moment.
Yeah.
People working on sex work decriminalization, people in Atlanta working on marijuana decriminalization, right? We don't ever hear about Black trans folks and those who have been caught up in the system because of that, right?
In New York, they finally stopped harassing you if you out hooking, you know. So finally, yay, you can hook freely in New York.
Yeah. And shout out to Miss Cayenne Dora Show, another one of your daughters. And T.S. Candy out here. So many folks.
Everywhere.
See?
So they take one from every country on the coast, from here to California. They'll have no stories.
Right. Oh, that's so beautiful. Well, when Isaiah's older, what from your story do you want to I guess which values from your story do you want Isaiah to take on and hold as a baton in his hand?
I want him to be strong and vigilant, and to not give in to the pressures of society, you know, to be his own person, regardless of what that is, you know, and to go forward, to live his life, to find a comfortable way to exist. I hope so.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. And I know that goes for all of the other children that are
every one of them.
No doubt coming your way. I'm sure you have a child every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're entering the last part of the conversation. I want to raise up for our audience who's been rolling with us, that we will have a Q&A portion soon, you know, so after the next few questions.
Okay.
Yeah, so y'all get them ready and come forward with those. Okay, so as we enter this last section, I feel like I have to name again just like the beautiful power it is to be in space with you always and learn so much from you. When did you know you were an icon?
What?
When did you know you were a legend, an icon?
I don't know when I first heard it, but when I did hear it, I looked around for, I wanted to meet the person. You know, I don't think that applies to me, because I just do the work. That's all. If they do apply that to me, I would hope that they would take the time to think about it and then pick somebody else. I'm not, I don't feel I'm an icon. You know, I'm busy. I got work to do. Things to go, people to see, contacts design.
Right. Too busy to even think about it. Yes.
Yeah, too busy.
So humble servant. So, I think that there are so many folks who struggle with trying to figure out how to be the leader that they need to be. Do you have any advice for the folks on this call around how to figure out, what kind of leader they need to be to make it in this work?
You can't say whether or not you are the leader of any group, because it isn't you who picks the leaders, it's the people. They pick their leaders. And, all you can do is do the work. I've come so many times, I've seen people rise up in the this, and they fall short of what a leader is, and if they would just let it go and concentrate on the work, be there to support the girls, to be their mothers, help them understand what they have to go through, to teach them how to fight, because it's not easy being a transgender woman, especially in society. They pick on us for every reason. The gays don't want us, the lesbians don't want us, other trans people don't want us, So we got to dig in and fight for it, and that's not something you can say, well, I'm a leader of such a group, If you don't fight, you're not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Right. That makes so much sense. The people choose their leaders, right?
They do, because, how can you get up in the morning and go out there and, yes, I'm a leader of such a group. You sit down, child. Go take a breath, wake up again. No, the people choose who their leader is, as always. They struggle so hard. It's not easy getting up every day and fighting the good fight, and not having, they choose who they want to lead them, and that's it.
Yeah, what I hear from all of that is just the importance of figuring out your purpose before you kind of try to herd people this way or that way, right? That the values have to be intact, and that relationships are so key,
Yes.
And again, like you always remind us, like being rooted in community is important. When I think about my work in activism and the label of activist and even the label of organizer, right? That those aren't things that I necessarily chose. Those are things that were put onto me after I did work, right? I did the work, right? And I imagine it's similar for you, as like you were fighting and you were consistent, and had a consistent kind of core value. And that's how you became the legend, the OG. I'm gonna call you the legend OG, but
yeah, okay.
But yeah, that is organic, or it should be.
It is. And the fact that it happens that way is the way it happens. You can't change it. There's certain people that would like to be in my position. And I told them, go right ahead. You know, if you do it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's beautiful. All right. So our last question, one that I ask you all the time, but I know partly because it changes. But right now, what is giving you hope?
You know, Asaya,
Yeah.
he gives me lots of hope for a better tomorrow, a brighter future. I believe in his existence. You know, he he will carry it forward, whatever it is, whatever direction he decides to go in. You know, he'll do it. Yeah.
Yes, Isaiah will. Well, thank you so much, Mama Major, for
Oh,
the
thank you, honey.
conversation.
Yeah. Thank you to Andrea Jenkins, wherever I can't see you, but I know you're there.
Yes.
Thank you so much, both of you. And this is the time of the discussion where we'll engage in Q&A. So
Oh, good.
I see Andrea has her hand raised. Why don't you go first, Andrea? Oh, you're muted.
Yes. I'm just so in awe and so incredibly grateful for both of you
Thank you, honey.
being here and sharing your love and your wisdom and all of that. One of the questions that Raquel asked you, Mother Major, was who inspired you? And I agree with you absolutely. Having come out 30 years ago, there was not a lot of, or who did you look to? She didn't say who inspired you necessarily, but who did you look to for you know, I don't know, guidance, and there wasn't a lot of people, particularly
No.
Black people.
Oh, there
So
wasn't.
so
No.
you're absolutely right. But you know, I know for me, it was really like I was welcomed into the drag community,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I found, you know, space, where I found, you know, kind of acceptance, if you will, and it
Oh,
was
sure.
Cuddy. It was Cuddy.
Yeah.
It was, you know, the girls can be pretty cool, but loving though, right? And
Yes.
you know, so I'm just wondering if you can talk about how drag, because it pains me so much that so many young trans people, and I'm just going to say particularly white trans people, really kind of um, denigrate the trans, I mean, not the trans, but the drag community and drag identity, etc. And like, that's what really helped me. And I'm just wondering how or if that played a role in your
Oh,
life.
for sure it did. Are you kidding? If not for Miss Kitty in Chicago, I would not be the same woman.
Yes.
You know, um, they embraced you and made me realize that I was not a tall, awkward so-and-so, you know.
Right.
And they showed me, like I refer to always, the movie with Natalie Wood, the Gypsy movie.
Mm-hmm.
And when she looked in the mirror, she said, "Oh God, Mama, I'm beautiful," because she got find that was it.
Right.
You know, I turned around, I kissed Kitty like I never kissed anybody before.
Okay.
She was just wonderful, you know, and it was through that I got who I was, she put me in 3-inch heels and told me to short this skirt a little bit. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
God
no,
for them. Yeah.
right. I mean, it's just, and I think it's just, I mean, RuPaul. I mean, people, you talk about the visibility movement, Raquel, but RuPaul was on TV before Laverne and Janet, but people were kind of hating on her, and she's still on TV now, right?
Yes.
Still doing her thing. So I just wanted you to speak to that. Right, exactly. Right. And it's a different lane, but it's all going in the same direction, right? And so I just wanted to lift that up, and thank you for acknowledging that too. But I think it's a part of our history that gets kind of short shift.
It does.
Well, it's what it is. They've got to learn and accept it, and that's that. Because before you get to I'm a trans woman, you got to do a couple of shows.
Right, exactly.
No, it's
I'm
so true.
every woman.
Thank
It's
you.
all in me.
Well, the funny thing is when I came to my identity in drag. I mean, that's not often a part of my story because a lot of that came in college, right? But that was the first kind of gender playground I had, was like student drag shows, because we would do like fundraisers for the LGBTQ student group on campus. So yeah, and exactly what you said, Andrea, like that RuPaul was the first Black gender nonconforming anything I ever saw, like from the supermodel music video to the show that they had on VH1.
Right.
And I remember being mesmerized, not knowing what I was looking at, but I was like mesmerized. I was like, something here resonates. So yeah, I mean, it's so true. Like and then thinking about our history, like Marsha was a drag performer, like unabashedly so. Like so many folks kind of straddled that line. And honestly, I think that that's really the future, right? Like I think we're interestingly in a rigid moment where transness, we're kind of brushing up against what binary means, right? And more of the younger generation is like, actually, it's not rigid like that. Let's bring back some of that old kind of gender nonconformity.
Let's bring back Sylvester.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, somebody needs to do a movie, a play, write a book,
about
all the things. Sylvester changed everything.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah.
He was something.
I saw Sylvester at least 3 times in concert.
I saw one. Yeah. He was something, boy. Yeah.
For real. Mighty real.
Oh yeah. Oh, thank goodness.
That's wonderful. So folks, now that you've had a few minutes to think up a question for any of our 3 speakers here, does anybody want to ask a question, engage with our speakers? And if you feel more comfortable popping a question or something into the chat, feel free to do that. I know some of our folks are maybe prefer that route. Rox, where are you at? You have something that you want to talk about with our panelists?
Oh, I'm mesmerized, you know, mesmerized.
Definitely.
What about you, Sabby? Do you have anything? Because you've been the architect for a lot of this too.
You know, I just really, when I'm in discussions like this one, I mean, there's just so much that I'm aware. I just have this hyper awareness that these are not happening on an everyday basis. You know, young trans and non-binary kids are, you know, I think more and more finding support networks, but just watching you two engage and watching all three of you engage, I'm like, you know, who is going to tell these stories? Who is going to make those films? Who is going to, you know, really, so I guess the thought that is lingering with me and is, how do we get the call to action that I hear Miss Major, that I hear Raquel, I hear Andrea making, that uplift all trans stories, trans people of color stories? How do we make that happen? Like, how do we permeate the airwaves in ways that continue this fight? And I hate to throw such a big question, but like, I want those stories because we have so many young nibblings in our life that they're really going through it and, you know, figuring out who they are. And I want them to know, like, we love them. And I want the world to, you know, like, support them. And maybe that's a side effect, you know, like a nice little personal thing I would love for them to have. But how do we get this call? How do we get those stories told? Because I agree that they have to.
Well, you know, you got to get the young kids to at least pull the stories out of their elders. You know, they don't have them on their own. The only way to get them is to get the elders to share the story with them. You know, that's the way to get it out. And then do something with it. You know, write a book, but, you know, tell somebody else, you know. But that's the only way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I think about a lot is something that invoking Janet Mock, but one of the things she says about her memoirs is it was important for her to tell her story to herself, right? And so that resonated a lot with me. And then, you know, I think for me, it's like, even when I was giving the speech at Brooklyn Liberation, like for me, it's like the telling the story to the self is so important. And as a first step, you know, and then you tell your story to others, right? And kind of figure out what their stories are too, right? Like that's the community piece that I think you've been talking about a lot, Mama Major. And then exactly what you just said, figuring out how to utilize that story. I mean, for me, stories are a fundamental organizing tool. Like that's how we shift society, is by utilizing our stories as tools to make those changes in whatever places that we're in. So, you know, I think that those are some steps. And one thing that strikes me as I, you know, look at the screen and see all of us together is like, the other thing that kind of ties us too is that we're not just storytellers, right? But we're storytellers who understand that we also have to fight for our lives and the lives of our people. And we do that at the same time, right? Like Mama Major is an OG organizer, and she continuously is finding ways to use her story to change the conversation. As we know with the book that's coming out about your life, right? Like that work is ongoing, right? For me, I mean, I'm working on a book but also using the platform that I now have. I mean, organizing looks a little different for me now because it's about how I can move resources to local groups. And so that's a lot of my behind the scenes work now.
Mm-hmm.
And for Andrea as well. Andrea is a public servant of the highest degree. And also has a body of written word that continues to grow, as we know with the poem. So I mean,
and I'm working on a book too. I am working on a book too.
Right? So it's all there, but that was one thing that I didn't get from journalism school because the whole idea of it was from a very white, cis, het, privileged imagination. And it was Black trans people and women who may not have gotten to go to school, right? Who fueled me to understand, oh, wait, that knowledge had to be married with those kind of technical things that I had learned in school.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing, I don't know if they told you this, but I'm awfully proud of you, baby.
Oh. Thank you.
So deeply proud of Raquel. Oh my God.
Yes. Yeah.
I when I saw the what was it? The Google ad, I think that came out.
That they didn't tell me about, so I only knew about it when people said, I think I saw you on something.
Oh, honey, that gave me so much life. It was Google, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over the holiday. Yeah, I mean, that's the growth of our story. Because that whole thing was about Black liberation.
Yes. Yes.
But they had Raquel Willis in that video creating the intersection of Black and trans identity. And that's a milestone that we had not reached, I think, until that moment. So that was so, I was so moved by that. And the little girl at the end, the little baby with her fist up, but but yeah, no, I'm so proud of you, Raquel. Just so incredibly brilliant and talented, and servant leader too. And like Major said, you know, you don't just get out there and call yourself a leader. Like, the community has to anoint you as a leader, right? You know, and you have been anointed.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
Such a beautiful moment. We did have a question come in via chat, and the person is just a little bit shy to share it themselves, so I'll be the person to share it for them. So they said, it's humbling to think about this long lineage of Black, trans, and trans of color resistance to police violence. It's also troubling to think that this has been going on for so long and that we're still facing the same issues faced at Stonewall, Compton's cafeteria, etc. What do you think it will take to end state violence? What keeps you hopeful about making this change?
Wow. When will it end? There's no telling when it'll end, the violence against Black transgender women. I would hope that it would be sooner rather than later, but it hasn't been, you know. This case that just happened is very important. It's a landmark case, but I can't help but think, well, what would it have been if it hadn't been a woman, a Black transgender woman that that guy had killed. What would it have been if that had been what happened? I can't say that the jury would have come back with the same course that they did.
I don't even know if people would be marching in the streets saying, say her name.
Right.
Oh, honey, none of that would happen. None. Yeah. Because when someone got killed in Minnesota, they beat up a girl in one of the gas stations.
Yeah, Ayana
Yes.
Dior. Hashtag
No one
Ayana
said
Dior.
nothing about her. Nothing about her.
No.
So I can't say. I don't know.
No. That's why I lifted her name up in my poem.
Good.
But no, it was not.
No.
It was not
No.
a outrage. It was not a,
Nope.
Nothing.
And they've been killing us back in the 40s. So a change, I don't expect it. Not yet.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to be hopeful because just losing one person is enough, right? I mean, it's too much, right? Losing one person is too much. And being Black and trans, being even Black and a woman, right? I mean, it was a milestone to get a conversation around even Breonna Taylor as a Black cis woman, because that was not happening initially.
No.
So there's so much work to be done. But I will say one thing that's interesting though is if this time last year, if you said anything about abolition publicly, people eyes would gloss over, like you'd be looked at like you were a joke. And it has become something because of the work that Andrea, you've done, people on the council in Minneapolis did, obviously the activists and organizers, Black Vision Collective, many folks did. Miriam Kaba just wrote a book about abolition, and of course, the foundation of work that you've been doing for decades, Mama Major. We can talk about.
I want to shout out Rox Anderson, who was on this call too, who has been on the forefront leading that conversation around abolition too.
Right. And actually, I think Rox, you were in another space that I think I gave a talk at maybe as well, because or maybe I was visiting a student group. So yeah, but I mean, I think about how we can even just start the conversation around abolition publicly now from a different space than we could 2020.
Well, that's because the white people are now concerned. All of a sudden, all the white people care. That's why now we at least get a voice. They will hear us, So thank God for white people.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, Raquel. I think we gotta have hope, because as much as things are still the same, things are changing. They really are. I mean, when they were beating up, when the police were beating up people in Stonewall, like, there was no conversation about it. There was no. It was just the way it was. It's just, especially, I mean, half the people didn't even want to identify as being gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender, whatever. And now, now we can talk about, I mean, we're on the cusp of gaining rights, equal rights for trans people. And that has been a long fight, and that's gonna happen. So I think we gotta have hope, even though the change is incremental, progress is slow, but we keep moving forward, and that's why we gotta have hope. I mean, you talk about the word abolition. People never thought slavery was gonna end. There were people who just couldn't see it, and that's 260 years in our rearview mirror now. You know, people thought women would never be able to vote. You know, that's 100 years in our rearview mirror now. You know, so we as a society, again, it's very slow, but we do keep making progress.
And you gotta keep hope alive.
Yeah, that's the only thing that keeps us going. And you got to keep fighting, as Mama Major told.
Yes.
We got to keep fighting. It ain't gonna just come. We got to fight for it.
No.
I love this discussion. It's really powerful. I want to close us out with, if you were to give a call to action to the folks in this virtual room, or something they could share out as a call to action to their people when they go back to wherever they're going this week, virtually or in person, what's that one call to action that you would give to, let's say, white folks, and one call to action you would give to our trans folks of color? If that feels helpful, either or, both.
Well, irregardless of who you are, what you are, how you think, what you do, it's real simple. Be prepared to fight for it. Whether you're transgender, Black, white, Asian, you know, be prepared to fight.
Yeah.
Big girl.
Yeah. All of that. Yeah. I don't think that there is, well, there could be a special call to action, I think, for different folks, but I think right now, you know, the general thing is people have got to do the internal work of figuring out what their privileges are. We all have some type of privilege, right? Whether you're able-bodied or neurotypical or, you know, whatever, right? Like there may be some type of privilege there, and figure out that line of the oppression as well. I think we get caught up in thinking that we're only one at any given time, and we're always more complicated than that. And I think we got to figure out our stories, the things in our stories that we need to heal from. Like, what is your trauma, honey? Because if you want to do this work on behalf of the community and you're not doing that personal work, that trauma is going to come out on other people, you know, and that's not okay, right? And then, you know, I think the last thing is what are the things that bring you strength? Draw those closer and share those gifts with your people, right? So that they can also feel strong alongside you.
I would add, and I be prepared to fight, figure out your own trauma. I've seen that just spill out all over people so much, and it's so painful to watch. You know, I would just add, be true to you. Be who you are. That is probably the most radical thing that we can do, is to live our true, authentic lives.
Andrew, and Yes, you do. Live your true, authentic life. I love you so.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mama Major. I love you so. I love you, Raquel. Sabby, I am so deeply in love with you and everybody on this call. I think I know quite a few of you, and it has been a true joy, honor, and delight. I laughed, I cried. I much of everything you guys were saying, I resonated with. I don't call myself an advocate or activist or anything like that. People
Yeah.
call me that. You know, and like you said, Miss Major, I just show up and do the work. Sometimes, you know, like a lot of times people, they take pictures of different things, you know, like the group. And I go back and I look at the picture. And I'm like, I was a part of that, but I'm not in the picture. Like I did the work, and then I just keep moving, man. Right. And I missed the picture. I'm off to the next thing. You know, so so I really do resonate with everything you both said tonight, and you both are incredible leaders. Ms. Major, to see you still putting in major work for our trans sisters and trans brothers is just inspiring. And to see you bringing a new life into this planet and loving it, it's given me hope. And that's what I think gives us all hope. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that story, for keep moving what it means to be trans, what it means to be non-binary, what it means to be authentically you.
Yeah.
Like you keep moving the dial on that.
Yeah. It keeps changing.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you too, honey. And God bless you.
God bless you. Mwah. Yes.
Love you.
Thank you
Love
so
you
much,
too.
all three of you. This is, I'll remember this for a long, long time. And I know that folks on this call, thank you so much for being here. I know that it has impacted you as well. Thank you so much for the energy that it took to arrive here, to share so much of yourself, and to keep doing the good work that you're doing, and to encourage each of us to fight, keep fighting, to rejuvenate our battery, and then get back in there.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and thank you so much for joining us.
Take
Bye,
care, baby.
everybody.
Goodbye. Take care.
Bye, all.
Bye.
Lots of love. Bye, Key. Maida.